Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Ashley, and today I'm joined by President and CEO of Hope Fleet, Danny Moroney. Hope Fleet is a nonprofit humanitarian organization that sails essential supplies and services to vulnerable children and families in the Caribbean and Latin American communities. And Danny's journey started when he discovered how sailing could become a vessel for hope, literally and figuratively. So I'm excited for this conversation and to learn more. Danny, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
No, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So, you are doing incredible work with Hope Fleet, and your mission to serve started at a young age. So, could you just take us back a little bit on your journey and what initially sparked that desire and inspiration for you?
Yeah, actually, so I was about 14 years old. So my mother and that side of the family is all from Jamaica, but I was born and raised in the US. And when I was 14, I was living in Michigan, and my grandfather, so my mother's father, passed away in Jamaica. And we said, okay, well, let's go down and attend the funeral. And that was my first time ever going to Jamaica. In fact, it may have been my first time leaving the country, aside from Canada. And so I got down, and because we have family there, we didn't just stick to the tourist sections. We went into the bush. A few hours in, and I think at that point, at 14 years old, I was really hit with a lot of compassion because I saw such a beautiful country, and yet to that I'd never yet experienced a level of poverty in some areas, and I could only imagine how difficult life was in some of these areas in Jamaica, even though you have such a beautiful country. And I thought to myself, I said, I don't know what I can do, but it certainly has to be more than nothing. And so after that trip and really eye opening experience, I came back to Michigan and I started emailing these. Well, we used to call them orphanages, now we call them children's homes. But I emailed these children's homes in Montego Bay, Jamaica, that my grandfather used to be a pastor of a church, and they used to work with some of these children's homes and support them. And so I emailed these homes and I said, what is it you guys need? How can we help? And they were kind enough to reply. And they said, supplies. Where I'm a nation, we import a lot of supplies, diapers, lotions, textbooks, those basic necessities. They said if we could get more of those, then we could reallocate money into, more beds or staffing, other things like that. And so it was really at that moment that I started to see like a piece of a vision. I saw a bunch of sailboats leaving from Florida and going into the Caribbean to bring supplies. But I had never been on a sailboat. I didn't know anything about sailing, but I couldn't shake it. And so, and I think it's hilarious because it's really funny because I think a lot of people they see me and yeah, I'm a sailor and I'm a captain, and they're like, oh well, he's using his passion for good. And it was actually the other way around. I had no idea about the sailing world, but I just couldn't leave this idea and thought, is it possible? Is it viable? And I was living in Michigan, so I wasn't even close to where I needed to be. So years later, so about 18 years old, I packed up the car. Everyone knew I was moving to Florida to get a boat, and because you can do all the research on the computer and learn about it, but until you get down and actually do it, you have no idea really what it's about. And I said, on paper, I think this idea could work, but I need to be where, pretty much boating capital of the world for it to see it through. So I moved down, and I was about 18 years old. About 19 years old, I stepped foot onto my first ever sailboat. It was a 30-foot single, sailboat. I stepped on board, and that was the first time I'd ever been on a boat. And I signed the contract to pay it off, and worked a couple jobs, and learned so much. And I was really, really grateful to all the people that didn't discourage the dream or idea, but in fact helped further me along. And the two people that actually taught me how to sail lived, so I lived on this 30-foot boat, and then right beside me was another 30-foot sailboat. And this married couple were certified trainers. And so they took me under their wings, and we took our boats out, and they literally showed me the ropes. That's where the saying comes from. But, they really taught me a lot. And then, years later, after hopefully and everything started, we were able to we had a banquet. This was 10 years after that moment. We just had like a banquet to thank people. So we called it a banquet. And we invited even that couple. And it was a touching moment because 10 years later, after, everything's happened now, I was able to honor them and say thank you for teaching me, but not squashing my dreams. And there were tears. But anyway, so that's really how it started was, okay, I'm learning how to sail. And then, if I'm being completely honest, I was we were about to start. I got the initial board together. I was 22 at the time, 23, so I was still
Wow.
quite young. And I was ready to, kind of get the board together and start the process. But I felt it becoming a bit too much about me. It started to matter that my name was on paperwork and my name was here and there. And I knew that that was the wrong approach. I think it was a lot of, I'm immature now, but I was very immature back then. And, I don't, yes, I wanted to help, but I don't think my heart was all in the right place. And I didn't want pride to get in the way of what this was supposed to be. So I kind of actually put everything on hold and just grew up, for, years later, probably about 4 or 5 years later. And then I knew it was time. I was like, okay. And it's funny, the time when you actually get to a point when you don't really want to have the title CEO is probably when you should be one, because now it's awkward. I don't introduce myself as a CEO, not even for the humility aspect, but because it's weird. It's like, oh, I'm CEO.
So, what happened in that gap where you took a pause and then you came back years later?
I was living on the sailboat for a few years, and I don't know if I was running to or running away, but I sold the boat, and everything I had, and I moved to New Zealand. And
That's a big plot twist.
Google Maps was always a very dangerous place for me because I would just get on Google Maps like, oh, I could just move away. And then I was like, oh, maybe Miami. And then I just kept scrolling and I just kept going and found New Zealand. And I was like, oh, you cannot get further. If you wanted to know the furthest place away, it's probably New Zealand. So I lived in New Zealand and Australia for a couple of years. And at this point, and even in the US, I worked I love kids. I love angry children. And so I worked in children's homes and in Sarasota, Florida, where I am now, before I moved abroad. And then even when I moved to New Zealand and Australia, I still worked in different, youth shelters or children's homes, and just met some wonderful people. Really, moving to a place where no one, and I didn't yeah, I did a little research online, but I landed and I knew absolutely nobody. And there's something about that really changes some of your mindset. I mean, you even think about how long it takes to get a hug from someone that actually knows your name and story. That takes months when you move to a new place just to get an embrace. So these different things anyway, all that to say, I learned a lot about myself. I took a lot of time by myself, walking and getting lost. And so I really enjoyed it. And that really kind of helped me grow up.
What were some of the biggest things that you learned about yourself in that?
I think really how I operate and work, the brevity of life. Like, you start to you see your spot as, man, I'm just a speck in this. I'm such a small piece in this world. And it gives you a bit of perspective and clarity. And I think that's really what I needed, was just to, I'm a small piece of whatever this is. And we are here for a short time on earth. So what was I going to do about that? How was my life going to, like, what is the actual, the important things of life? What do I focus on? And so I really did. I knew that, I was like, it can't be coincidence that from 14 and all of this that compiled and everything that's happened, I said, I know that's my part in this world to play. And so it really kind of got me to a point where I was like, okay, well, I think I'm ready, and I know this is the right thing for me to do. And so I called up the original team and I said, guys, I think we should continue doing this. And they said, yeah, we're waiting for you. And so I said, okay. And
Like,
so,
I'm ready to come back after my 2 years.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I came back, and we started the whole process of the 501(c)(3) and da 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 da.
Mm.
And we took a couple of years with it to really make sure we knew the foundations of it all, and built it the right way. And then we launched in 2019.
Wow, that's amazing. So this is year 6,
Yeah, coming up. I know
right?
it's crazy to. I mean, it did just feel like a blink of the eye.
So tell us a little bit about getting started. Some of the things that, some of your primary focuses early on, and then how has
Sure.
that evolved over the years?
Well, yeah. So you kind of, so when you start something, probably whether it's a business or a nonprofit or any kind of initiative, you have this vision of how it's probably going to look before you start, right? And then, of course, it's going to change and shift. But by the time it changes and shifts, you're already on the train. You know what I'm saying? And so, and that's the fun bit. So we initially started and thought, okay, well, we're going to have to get our own fleet of sailboats. That was the initial thing. So we got one sailboat, which we still have. We actually have to do some work on it to relaunch it. But it's a 40-foot sailboat on the east coast of Florida, and we got that in 2019. At the time, Cuba was open for private vessels to go to Cuba, and we thought this is perfect. There was actually some heartbreaking stories that Cuba, wonderful country, but just lacks a lot of things, and so they said they're actually reusing needles on children at that time, and that broke my heart. And I was like, we don't. I mean, that doesn't happen here. And so that was a very simple thing that we were going to initially do. We said, all right, we've got a boat, and children is our main focus. We try to look and see what's already happening. Is there a church that's working with children, or a children's home, or a school? And how can we best support those efforts? So we found some trusted contacts, and through some church-run clinics down in Cuba, we said, okay, this is where we'll start. And then legally, Cuba shut down for us the same month we were kind of getting ready to go. So I said, okay, well, that's not going to happen. And then fast forward maybe 2 months, I sat down with the team and I said, guys, we could go to the Bahamas. I don't know the need right now in the Bahamas, but, that's where we could reach with this boat. And then 2 weeks later, Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas, and that was the largest hurricane that they've ever had on record.
I remember that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
was overseas at the time, and the flight coming back got canceled and pushed 3 days later because of Dorian in summer of 2019.
Yeah, exactly. And it sat. This one was a Category 5 that sat over the Bahamas for days.
Mm-hmm.
It was about to come to Florida. So that's why I think everyone was a bit more impacted here in the US, because it was so close to coming to us and then went to the Bahamas.
Yep.
So I said, okay, well, are we ready to respond? No. Do we have a plan? No. Because we knew we were going to do disaster response. We just didn't anticipate starting with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, okay, but if there's something that we can do, let's do it. And so we started getting supplies and things together. We got our boat, and we started making a couple of trips. We found a small little church over there that was really doing a lot of community work and giving supplies out to all of these different people. And we said, okay, these are our partners. And so we kept bringing supplies. We did a couple of voyages on our own boat. But then we saw something that really kind of changed the course, so to speak. But we we saw, because the Bahamas was so close to Florida, there was a lot of private boaters that were going and bringing supplies, and they were doing it on their own accord. And there was a lot of passion, a lot of disorganization. So we said, I wonder if there's something we can do here to kind of harness this power and organize it. And so we came up with what we call Ocean Reach. And that's where private boaters can sign up with us. And that's been the most impactful thing that we've done. Now we have, I mean, years later, we have about 150 vessels that are volunteer vessels,
Wow.
ranging everywhere from 30 something foot to 150 something foot. And so they sign up with us, they do the background checks, they give us all the information. They're already going. So
Mm.
we just do a lot of the coordination and finding the partners on the ground, whether again it's children's homes or school or whatever it is, and then finding out the supplies, collecting the supplies, and then we'll load up these boats and we deal with the government and the paperwork to make sure that they don't have any issues. And then we coordinate this fleet of vessels to bring aid to where it needs to go.
That's amazing. So how has your footprint expanded? Because you touched you're in the Bahamas, you're in Cuba, you're down in
Dominican Republic, and then
Dominican.
yeah, it's been a strange year because we, again, what you think of what's going to be the next step. Granted, this is very unorthodox. Like, we get this whole nonprofit where we're using private boats to move things is not common. And so a lot of this is not really a whole lot of like peer-to-peer review. So we're figuring this out as we go. But we thought, okay, well, we'll start with the Bahamas and then kind of work our way to the next furthest place and next furthest place. And so we were kind of doing that. We're in the Dominican Republic. Um, and then we thought, okay, where else do we expand? But then another disaster happened in June of last year with Hurricane Beryl. And Hurricane Beryl, which we barely got any media on it. It hit Texas a little bit when it was like a Cat 1 or a tropical storm, but it really took out a couple of islands in Grenada and St. Vincent. I mean, completely destroyed homes, and people were homeless, jobless, starting from scratch. And we would typically not be able to respond because it's so far away. How are we going to get supplies from Florida to those places?
Right.
But and so normally we would just kind of put on our social media, hey, here's some great trusted organizations that are down there responding, please support.
Mm.
But then we started getting calls from these different organizations, kind of like these boating groups. And they said, hey, we've got a lot of boats in Trinidad and other places. Would you be able to come and coordinate these vessels? And so we're like, okay, so maybe we can't get supplies down there immediately, but there's supplies in these neighboring islands and nations that really, if we just coordinate these boats bringing from one island to another island, that's what's missing right now. And we started, I don't know, probably 20, 30 boats that, we started coordinating coming from these other islands. And they were able to get a tax write-off because they're donating supplies. And we were able to make sure that those supplies got into really what's going to make the most impact. We found some ground partners there. So that kind of expanded our footprint
Yeah.
a bit organically, because now we have all these relationships and connections, and we're like, okay, well, this is where it's going to be. And we know eventually we're going to outgrow past the Caribbean because boaters are going everywhere. But we would rather do a few things well than a lot of things disorganized. And so we don't want to grow too quickly outside of our scope.
Yeah, so that leads me to my next question of just what are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced organizationally, but I think more personally as you are leading the organization through this.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I think because I was listening to a lot of these episodes that you've done, and I love the whole the endurance and the perseverance. And I was considering, and I said, I think for a lot of that, I didn't really consider it at the time, and I think because I'm very need driven, right? And if it's something for me, I probably don't have as great of perseverance or endurance if it's only going to affect my life. But when I know, like, you start to know these children's names or these schools and their stories, and you know what they need, and it's simple stuff, and you can see in your head how it could work, I don't really consider the obstacles so much, because you're going to have that with everything. And personally, I think one thing I've learned, it was explained to me, maybe it was a psych class years ago or something, but I always remembered this analogy about personal growth and development. And you picture yourself, right? Let's say you have a mountain and it spirals up this path, right? And you picture your ideal self at the top of this mountain. And this path you're walking up to get to your ideal self, you're making those little changes, right? You're like, oh, I want to be this kind of person, and I want to be a giving person, and I want to be this. And you're making these small changes as you continue walking up this mountain to get to your ideal self. And the thing is, you never actually reach your ideal self because your view changes. And so you work on yourself, and then you're like, oh, I want to be this. Oh, I want to be this. And that's good. It's not so much about being the ideal self immediately, it's the steps. As long as you keep making steps in the right direction. And then when you're leading something, which I kind of hit me by surprise, because I'm like, oh, right, there's people following me. Like we're in this, we're leading this. And so then I'm like, gosh, I don't think I'm a micromanager. Am I even a manager? I'm like, oh, we have to do this now. Like we have to make sure. So it's really, I can't say if I'm definitely not the best leader. I'm okay, and we walk it together. And but I think that's my main thing, that I want to make sure that anyone on the team or anyone getting involved, we're in this together. And so it's been fun to learn things together and face challenges together. But I'm so blessed to have a team that really, I mean, we become like family, and so it's been a great ride.
I love that. Yeah, and I just love that image, how you were painting that picture, right? Of just this, like, as we're trying to go and realize more of ourself, but also our experiences change, our perceptions, and then how that influences how we see self and just how we're learning and things like that too. Giving myself permission to change my mind about something and
Mm,
really being open, right, to what God is revealing,
yeah,
because I think sometimes we get in this little box, right? We can put ourselves in boxes, we put others in boxes, we put our experiences in boxes,
hmm,
and it's such a limitation.
yeah,
And so giving myself permission to change my mind about something has really opened me up all the more to these different possibilities.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
No, that's really cool. And then one thing that I've kind of been thinking about this last year is, because so I still very much feel like I'm new to all of this, and even though it's been 5 6 years, I'm like, this is fresh, and it's not really anymore, but it feels that way. But now I have people who, these younger adults that are coming up. I'm 33. Tell people it's my Jesus year. I'm getting old, but like I'm like I have these younger adults that are coming up to me, and they're looking for advice or this and that, or I'll sit down with them if they're thinking about, they feel like they need to start a nonprofit or something, and I'll sit down. But I don't know what's happened. Maybe it's culturally or what we're doing, but I think maybe a lot of what's happened is self care may have started good, but now it almost seems like it's problem avoidance, if that
Mm,
makes sense. Because I find that these younger adults are talking about these issues, and they're like, oh, I'm stressed, and they back away from it. Or, oh, that,
mm,
that causes anxiety or whatever it is, and they take a step back. And I say,
mm.
what a disservice to yourself, because that's what grows you. The pressures are good. The problems are good. You look, how often do we look back over the problems that we really thought were going to be huge, right? And then we're like, oh, you know what? It's not that bad.
For sure. I love that you brought that up because it's that leaning in with curiosity, to what it is that we're experiencing. And when there's a reason, right, that we
Yeah.
feel the things that we feel. So what happens when we just lean into that, right? And what
Yeah.
we can learn about ourselves. And it's those moments, I believe, is how we build endurance then for that
Yeah.
next time when something else comes, because the challenges are going to continue to come. I think, sometimes you're like, oh, all right, well, once I get over this thing, right, then everything's going to be good. I'll be happy when
Right.
this happens. I'll be happy when that happens. And it's like, newsflash,
It keeps coming.
it keeps coming. But it's in these moments, right, that we're equipped. We
Yeah.
become more equipped for that next thing. And that's also the walk with God in that too, right? He's with us and all of that. And,
Yeah.
we can connect to that hope in those challenging times.
Absolutely. I've learned so many lessons, but I think one lesson that I've learned that was because I'm the kind of person where I'm always on to the next thing, right? I'm very forward, like, okay, da da da, solve that problem, next thing. Oh, we responded to that hurricane, or we sent supplies, this, and next thing. And I forget to look back.
Mm.
And granted, I don't think it's healthy to look back too long, but you need to look back from where you've come from and what God's brought you through, because that gives you the fuel to keep going, knowing that, oh man, I wasn't alone. That happened. So much good came from it, and I moved through. And then the other part, I a really big lesson for me. So I told you about how, we started to go from this one boat idea to having these other boats join the cause.
Yep.
Well, it didn't. It's laughable now, right? But let me explain this to you. In my head, I saw this piece of a vision, and it was sailboats, right? It was sailboats. So I moved to Florida and bought a sailboat. I learned how to sail. It was a sailing thing. Then we launched. We got the sailboat. We went to Bahamas, and great. Then we saw these other sailboats that were helping, and I was like, oh, we're going to open it up. Let's open it up to all sailboats, right? And this is where you have to hold on tight enough to a vision to where you can protect it, but not so tightly that it can't be malleable and changed, right? And so when these other boaters were coming into the picture, I sat down with the team. I sat down with a couple of people that I knew interested, and I said, I think we should open up to other sailors. And one particular guy that I trust, he said, I wouldn't just limit it to sailboats. Open it up to motorboats as well. And I was like, yeah, this is a sailing thing, right? And then literally the same week, I met with someone else, and they said the exact same thing. Open it up to all boaters. And I was like, okay, twice in a week. Let me think, am I standing in the way of something here? I'm like, yeah, I think I'm being an idiot, because it doesn't matter. Like, we originally did sailboats, a lot of it for, cost effective, and, it's a lot cheaper to get from one place to another place. But when it's a motorboat and it's not your fuel, it doesn't really matter. So why am I holding on so tightly to this idea? So I sat down with the team. I said, guys, let's open it up to all boaters. And they were like, yeah, that makes sense. 2 days later, the first boat that signed up was a mega yacht. And it was this 150-foot, like, multi-level yacht that called and signed up. They said, can we help? We're on our way to the Bahamas. I said, absolutely. I don't know if that was out of faith or stupidity, but I said, yes. And we knew there was this warehouse down in Miami that had, this is just after the hurricane, they had, a couple of, like, Bears Furniture donated a bunch of mattress sets, and so they had, like, they sent a semi truck up. We had another truck come. The owner purchased like 5 deep freezers. We were able to put like 50 hams and turkeys as well, because the church over there wanted to do a Christmas thing, and so we loaded up with food. And they took more than probably all the other boats that year, right? Not only that, they arrived, offloaded all of these supplies. We started getting reports saying, hey, my babies have been sleeping on the ground. Thank you so much for these mattresses, And then the owner wasn't even a part of that voyage. The captain was, but the owner saw what his team was doing, donated $100-something thousand. That went and built 6 completely new roofs and 20 something building projects. I would have missed all of that had I been so stubborn and held on to what I thought the full vision was. And so, man, the lessons you learn, and you have to look
Wow.
back to be like, wow, that was great. Either I learned some good things or bad things, but you apply and move forward.
That's amazing. I mean, just look at what happens, right? When you loosen the grip.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like when you talk about, learning something, right? And just the expansiveness, what it is that can be done that can blow our mind whenever we just learn to open ourselves up to those possibilities. And I think a takeaway from that is the people around you on your team paying attention to that and seeing, okay, it wasn't just one person, but it was more people on the team that are bringing this up, and you taking that like, okay, let's consider this.
I love that we get, like, I love what I get to do. Like, my favorite part is to sit down at a table with a group of people and say, here's the problem. What can we actually do about this? Right. And then things come up. And as long as they align with the vision, then you can just run with it. Right. And it's fun, but it's being attentive to the needs around you. And one of the things that I didn't mention that we do that's becoming, really important, but we didn't see it coming. Again, just like these other boaters, where it was like, okay, we were so focused on this, but we knew, and when we started to work with these boaters, we started hearing about these incidents of human trafficking on the water. And so we were like, man, there's been some documented cases and sometimes some sunken vessels, and they find bodies on board, and it's heartbreaking stuff. And we said, again, well, it's got to be something we can do. And originally, all we wanted to do was find an organization who could take reports. And then we were going to make that known to all of our boaters, like, hey, keep an eye out. If you see something suspicious on the water, please report to this organization. But we couldn't find an organization. And this was like, when you were like, this should not be our job. Like, this is not, like, we're a boating organization. But after sitting down with these different groups, we found out that most of these anti-human trafficking organizations are about awareness. There's actually very few in the reporting and responding. So it wasn't a massive directory that we had to go through to have these conversations, but we sat down and came up with, well, talking to these different groups, they said we would love if there was an app to report, and then we could handle some of the responding side. And so we said, okay, do we have the right people? And like, I'm telling you, like, God just puts the right people in place, and we just have on the team like an amazing software engineer, another one that volunteered who's just a background in security, another one that's app development, and they came together and worked. And then we did launch, it's about 2 years ago now, this, we call it Hope Watch, and it's monitored 24/7. It was intended for boaters because that was the main kind of draw, but we said, well, it can actually be global if someone, we're getting it translated to different languages and all of that. But so we monitor that, and we just encourage people, like, download it even if you don't think you need it, because there's some dark things going on right under our noses.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought I mentioned that, where it's like you think your path is going to be this way, but you know what? Sometimes you have to be open to pivot a little bit. That's where the good stuff happens.
Yeah, it's so encouraging. I mean, and I just think, you think about going in with such an open posture, right? And like just what can happen and then how that evolves. I wanted to ask you, I know, we've been sharing a little bit about faith and God's work and his involvement and just
Yeah.
partnering with him in all of this. How important has your faith been in this journey? And
Well, it's been monumental and foundational, even because you have your journey walks, right? Walks of, like, I like to consider faith a walk, right? Because it's not always easy. It's not always straight. It's not, you have these twists and turns, but you still walk forward. And when I was 14, I knew that this vision did not come from me because it didn't make sense. Like it's like I'm very aware that when I was a teenager and a young adult being like, we're going to get sailboats and go into the, it was crazy. And people would tell me, that's crazy. But I couldn't shake it. And it kept coming up, it kept coming up. And even when I think when I was, 22, and I said when it was becoming about me too much, my mother always said there's two things that'll destroy any ministry, and that's pride and greed. And that hit me. And I was like, I don't want to start this because this is bigger than me. I don't want to start this on rocky foundation. And that's why I left and moved abroad and had a lot of searching. And I even had to reconstruct my faith, I will say, because it's funny. My father is this white Catholic man from New York. And my mother is this Jamaican ordained minister with the Assemblies of God. You cannot get more diverse and yet still be under this Christian umbrella. But even with, the upbringing, I had to walk on my own to figure out, okay, who is God? Is there a God? And if there's a God, which God is it? And leaving and going to New Zealand and Australia, I think that was a lot of what really happened was I was able to solidify my faith. I even tried to disprove God at a point, and when I was 23, 24, and I was like, no, I don't believe in God. But it was like trying to disprove your grandfather who's sitting in the corner of the room. That's what it felt like. Because I still, even when I was like, oh, you don't exist, I felt him there. And I couldn't deny it. And I looked into science, I looked into different faith. And anyway, so that I think the foundation of my faith when I was 24, 25 came to the point where I said, life with God sometimes makes very little sense, but without him, it makes absolutely no sense at all. And that kind of became my foundation, and it grew from there. And then you just see too much and you experience too much. And I think that's the other part is it goes beyond coincidence. So many things that even in a month, things that happen, I'm like, how did that even work? And it just kind of, it really kind of redirects you. And you're like, I know I'm on the right path, And so it's really, it's been a stretching and growing. But there's something that I never want to do. And even I try to be mindful whether I'm on a podcast or I'm with boaters or anyone, is that we are a Christian organization. We make no apologies about that, but we are inclusive because I love that these boaters, many have faiths from all backgrounds or no faith, and yet they're okay with joining this because I think innately in all of us, we feel something that we want to be a part of. We want to help. And I don't think we're as divided as media and other, kind of outlets make it seem. I don't think we're that different. And I think spending time together has only been, and so yes, we're Christian, but we love serving with people who disagree with us completely, and we still love them, and we get to connect them, and they get to experience a lot of the I call it the tangible love of Christ. When you are able to serve with the church and see their impact and see the lives they're touching, or these children's homes that, are just, you leave different. And I'm glad that boaters, even though they may not understand about God or even like him, they get to be a part of it and experience something that they have to come to terms with afterwards.
It's so good. Me crying over here. Danny, we
Yeah.
just meeting for the first time. Wow, it's really amazing. I mean, I feel that like there's these places of connection in our humanity, right? And things that are bigger and beyond us
Yeah.
that connect us, that bridge the gaps, right? You can join in over here, I can join in, we can be part of this thing that ultimately is something bigger than both of us, right? And
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
beauty.
Yeah. It's fun. Throw people in the mix. Boaters are weird, by the way. Like any, we call them cruisers, right? The ones that actually go from country to country. They're a strange group, right? And they'll be the first ones to tell you. But it's so fun to see the diversity because we look at this database of all of these different boaters and their backgrounds, their lawyers or doctors or entrepreneurs or inventors, and they all still have this thing in common, this boating thing in common, right? And so we're able to kind of get them together and focus them on a cause and take a lot of that stress and worry out of trying to figure out who to trust and how to really help. And it's so amazing to see people step up to the plate and do something beyond them.
That's amazing. So what's the vision for the next 3, 5, 10 years ahead?
Yeah, well, we had a bit of a vision day in December with the team and sat down and said, okay, where are we on the right path? Are there things we need to let go, refocus? And I do think, I mean, these boaters keep joining, and it's every year it's like exponential. And so we want to make sure that we have requests, obviously. I mean, Haiti, we try and send boats in when we can. The Caribbean, really, there's some dire needs that we can do more about. I personally think it's going to be bases that we're going to create. Because we've got a good base here in Florida. I think we're going to need a base probably like Puerto Rico and a base elsewhere to where we can send supplies from those bases rather than all the supplies originating from mainland US. So I think as more boats grow, and we want to have people volunteer more. So we're looking into, actually we have got to fly. It's always weird when I have to fly to the Bahamas for work, but I do have to, I've got to go down there the next week or the week after, and we're a team, some of our team are flying there to kind of firm up the connections because, boaters can come and bring supplies, but there's so much more that they can do. And so we already get a list of their, kind of experience. And so we want to better connect these programs to where boaters, even if they don't have supplies, they can go and volunteer. Yeah. Because I think one thing that's really, really important to us is if a boater, right, they sign up and they want to take supplies to a children's home in Dominican Republic. If they don't want to donate, I mean, we don't charge for our services, right? If they don't want to donate to us, that's completely fine. But if they can go and visit with this children's home in the Dominican Republic, and they say, I want to help here. And if they give us not a dime, but they donate to that children's home, that's success. That's a win for us. I think, we're on the same team, right? And so even with the partners that we have, like if you don't want to donate to us, donate directly to the children's home. It's on the website. We put it out there. So I think a lot of what we can do, the 3 ways that we can really make a difference is supplies, volunteers, but just attention. If we can really exchange these experiences with these boaters and get them more engaged in these different places, I think that's really going to impact a lot of these communities and boaters. So that's kind of our vision, just to expand.
I love it. I love it. It's so good. I'm so excited for you. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing this. I'm really moved in a lot of ways, and I appreciate your insight, your wisdom. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and sharing.
That's kind of you. No, thank you for having me. I love what you're doing, and however we can support